In this video, I'm going to be talking about all things finding accommodation, from the different types of accommodation we have or that are available to you, to where you can find accommodation, also to the cost of accommodation depending on your city and the different factors that could affect the cost. And at the end of this video, I'll also be adding a little bit of spice. So I'll be sharing my experience on finding accommodation. Let me tell you guys something. It wasn't easy and I had to kiss a lot of frogs. Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ruth. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If it's not your first time, then welcome back. I'm a Nigerian student based in Germany. I live, study and work in Germany, and I really enjoy sharing my experiences with you guys for people who plan to come to Germany to study. So I make sit-down videos like this one and also vlogs where I take you through days or weeks or months in my life, just so you can get the experience of what it is like living in Germany for an international student from Nigeria, and just, regular day-to-day what that looks like. So in today's video, we'll majorly be talking about accommodation because I know it's that time of the year where students are planning to move in for the winter semester, and a lot of you guys are currently searching for accommodation and very anxious. Will I get accommodation? Will I not get accommodation? I think I can share good news with you that you would definitely get accommodation if you come here with the same vim that you're coming from home. You would find somewhere to live regardless of anything. You would definitely find a place to live. So don't worry too much about it. It might take a while depending on the city you're in, but you'll find a place to live. So today's video, I'm going to be talking about all things finding accommodation, from the different types of accommodation we have or that are available to you, to where you can find accommodation, also to the cost of accommodation depending on your city and the different factors that could affect the cost. And at the end of this video, I'll also be adding a little bit of spice. So I'll be sharing my experience on finding accommodation. Let me tell you guys something. It wasn't easy and I had to kiss a lot of frogs. And even now, my accommodation is obviously not the most perfect thing, but at least for now, being a student, it works for me in terms of cost and also in terms of being comfortable. So if that's the kind of video you want to watch and you think this video would be helpful, then please stick around to the end. Do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe if you do end up enjoying it, or at least enjoying my face. And also, for people who have been watching my videos and you've not subscribed, come on, I'm going to pause and give you guys time to go and subscribe. Okay, if you subscribe, thank you. You're the real one. I really appreciate it. And honestly, your comments and support on my videos are actually what gives me the motivation to do more. So without further ado, let's get right into today's video. So the first thing we're going to talk about is applying for accommodation, and there are different ways you can apply for accommodation. And usually the first step for any student who wants to come to Germany, I would encourage you to apply first on Studentenwerk because you can do it from home. Studentenwerk basically gives subsidized government housing to students, so you would find really good accommodation, but for very cheap prices. So that is a first place for you to start. I'm going to drop the link somewhere either on the screen or down in the description box so you can quickly register. Now, do not be fooled. It actually takes a while for you to get accommodation using Studentenwerk. So some people applied in 2022 and they just got accommodation in 2024. So it takes a while, usually 4 semesters before you get accommodation, and then for the rest of your 2 semesters you can be living in a very comfortable flat. I think the major disadvantage with Studentenwerk is the moment you are done with your studies, you have to vacate the premises. So there is no lapse or relaxation time for you to find, there's no relaxation time if you would have gotten a personal accommodation or a personal space from a private landlord. Then you can be paying rent there regardless and just biding your time until maybe you get a job and have to move cities or whatever, but it would give you a kind of soft landing if it's a private landlord. But if it's Studentenwerk, then you have to vacate the premises for the next student who is coming. The next way you can find accommodation is on your university's website or through university board. So on the school's notice board, some landlord posts up accommodation for students, and then also universities also post accommodation available for students as well on their university's portal. I know TUM does it, so I was able to attend some interviews from the applications I made via TUM's website. So if you are applying to Germany, also check out accommodation on your university's website The third place you can find accommodation is by private accommodation, so to private landlords. And this kind of method is usually the most common, and there are different types of accommodation you can get from a public landlord. But what's most common among students is the Wohnungsgemeinschaft, which is popularly known as the WG. Now, WG is a kind of living arrangement where you live with other students or other people, maybe people doing internships or people who are already working, but basically it's a shared flat. In some cases, you might be lucky enough to get a WG where you do not share a bathroom, but you have to share living spaces and the kitchenette or the kitchen. And then in some other cases, you might not be as lucky, and then you share all of the facilities in the house. So the toilet and the bathrooms and of course the kitchen and living spaces are all shared. And then you can also get a studio apartment. And a studio apartment is essentially just you living alone in a studio. So you have your own kitchen, your toilet, and your bathroom. And it's usually the most comfortable, but it's also very expensive if you do not get it from the student subsidized housing, which is Studentenwerk, but you get it from a private landlord. So next, we'll be talking about disparity in costs or price of these different types of housing. So it depends on the type of accommodation you're looking for. So you could either, as a student, popular among students, like I said before, is the WG, which is the Wohnungsgemeinschaft. But students also live in studio apartments as well. Some students actually contribute together with their friends and they rent maybe 2 bedrooms with living accommodation and everything, and then they share the flat together. But regardless, I think those are the two broad category of housing. So either a WG, and sometimes, like for me, I actually lived with a family in a WG, so I was sharing a flat with a full family. It was fun. Honestly, it's not as bad as it sounds. And then there are also like those studio apartments. The cost difference is usually a lot. So WGs are cheaper, of course, than studio apartments where you live by yourself. Something else that also determines cost is the location. So if you're finding accommodation in big cities like Munich, for instance, it's very expensive and it's also very difficult to find accommodation. And usually the price range from places like Munich to places like Schweinfurt can be a difference of 300 to 400 euros. So you might get the same flat in Munich for, let's say, 600 euros, but the same size of accommodation, you would get it in a place like Schweinfurt, which is deeper into Bavaria. So it's not as big as Munich. It's not even big anyways, but you would get that same flat for maybe 250 euros, and it's the same size of accommodation. Sometimes the amenities might even be better in places in smaller cities in Germany than in those bigger cities, but because of limited accommodation and the huge influx of people into those big cities, it's usually very difficult to find accommodation. Another thing that leads to cost disparity is the difference between cold rent and warm rent. So cold rent is essentially rent without amenities, so rent without heating or lighting. So you pay your eating bills, you pay your electricity bills, you pay your water bills by yourself. So that's separate from the rent itself. So the rent you pay is for the flat alone and nothing else. So all of the other amenities that come with the flat, you have to pay for it separately. And then for warm rent, which is something that I would encourage all students to do, so you don't have to bother about the other cost, like internet cost, for instance. The landlord takes care of everything in the warm rent, so you only pay your rent at the end of the month, and you have light, you have electricity and water, and everything is sorted, including your radio tax. So you don't have to pay anything when you pay the warm rent. You pay it once, and then every month you of course pay rent. And then another thing is the difference between furnished and unfurnished apartments. So as a student, you're basically living a nomadic lifestyle, right? So you do not want to rent an unfurnished apartment where you would have to buy a bed and furnish everything, and it's usually very expensive. And then when you have to leave the apartment, you have to sell those things off because it's not reasonable to take all of those things along. But in a situation where you're unable to find a furnished apartment and you get an unfurnished apartment you like, then a good place to search for furnitures would be Facebook Marketplace, Amazon. They carry really cheap furnitures. And also for decor pieces, you can check the Action stores in any city you're in. They also carry discounted items as well. So those are good places for students to shop if you do rent an unfurnished apartment. The typical cost of housing for students, a VG usually ranges from, so I've lived in 2 cities now, Ingolstadt and Munich, and also talking with my friends, I would say the typical range for a VG usually goes from list price about 250 euros to maximum price of, it can actually, the maximum, there is no maximum, but reasonable maximum price for a VG I would say would be maybe 650 euros at max. You shouldn't pay more than, I think if you're paying more than that for a VG, you might as well live in a studio apartment. Just add up some money and then go move to a studio apartment or live slightly out of the big cities. Yeah, and then something to also note is if you're coming from places like Nigeria, for instance, where you pay rent yearly, in Germany you pay rent every month. So every month you pay your rent, it's not yearly, and you're expected to pay your house rent on time. And of course, if you're unable to pay your house rent on time, you would have to pay the landlord with interest sometimes. So you would have to pay additional fees if you delay in making your payments. So that's something you have to do as a student. Make sure that at every point you're budgeting for your rent. Always put your rent at the back of your mind, because you can't live under the bridge. There's no bridge for you to live under. So the next thing is city registration, which is very important, and this is the reason why people actually want to get a space where the landlord actually provides city registration. So it provides you a document that would enable you actually register with the city. I can't remember the name of the document right now, but I'll put it somewhere on the screen so that you can actually see what it is. So it's basically a document the landlord provides to you to give to the government or the city where you're living in as proof that you actually have a place to stay. And this is very important, because without getting a house that has city registration, you wouldn't be able to register in the city, you would not be able to open a bank account, and inadvertently you would also not be able to access your block account funds. So when you're looking for accommodation, always check for accommodation that has city registration, so the landlord gives you that document to take to the city. Another thing is that some landlords will require that you have chauffeur or shufa. So the shufa is basically a document from your bank that states that you are debt free and that you can actually afford, or you don't owe people money. So if you have a very good shufa rating, the landlord it could also be really helpful for you if you're applying to accommodations in Germany. So the landlord sees that you actually are capable of paying your rent because you don't have history of debt. Next is how to search for accommodation. So for me, I basically used 2 major websites, and this has helped me so far. I used gesucht, and make sure you download the gesucht download the app. Do not use the website because it's easier and less confusing. So less clutter, it's simple to use and very intuitive. Although the language is of course in German, however, you can always translate it using Google Translate, and then it's just very easy for you to make your applications directly to the landlord. You can also create a profile, which I did, and this means that people would actually also reach out to you if they like your profile and they find you to be charming or friendly, or maybe by fate or by luck, they reach out to you that they have accommodation for you. And also you have to be careful so you don't get scammed in cases like that. The website I really use and I really like a lot is the Kleinanzeigen, where landlords actually advertise houses on there. So for the Kleinanzeigen, is another very confusing app to use, because unlike the gesucht, where it is at least in English but the ads are put up in German, the Kleinanzeigen app is completely in German, because I guess their target audience are Germans. So that's something that you have to look out for. I would maybe put on the side of the screen, while I'm talking about it now, how to check for VG, where to go on the Kleinanzeigen app to check for VGs or student accommodations, right? So I know I've spoken very lightly about rent, but currently I pay 460 euros on rent, and I live in a VG, and my space is 20 square meters thereabout. So it's relatively cheaper. previously I was living in Munich, where I paid 500 euros, and then later 530 euros on rent, and I was living with a family. It wasn't bad at all, but my space was also very small. It was about 12 square meters, and yeah, there were obviously, when you live with a family, you have to be respectful to them as well, so their own privacy, and they had children, so you have to really just think about of course, the children would make a lot of noise sometimes, and then you also have to think about the fact that, okay, this is a family, you can't just like come into the house very late in the night. As much as possible, you have to try to be respectful to people you live with, and that's very important. I think when you live with people, you have to consider the fact that you have to be respectful of them, of their space as well. When you use something, make sure you return it back and keep the space clean, because you're not the only one using those spaces. But that's a segue, and that's like a bit of a distraction from what we're actually talking about. So those are the two websites, like I said before, that I used to search. So I searched with the gesucht app and also the Kleinanzeigen app or website. And then another place where I've been lucky to get some few calls is my university website. So while I was still studying at TUM, I searched on the university's website, and I was able to get a few responses back, so of people who are actually telling me to come, because those landlords that put up their ads on those university websites actually are looking for university students to apply to their accommodation, which is why they put it up there on the university's website. And of course, you still have to be very careful, because I don't think the university does a thorough job of warding off scammers, so you have to be careful of getting scammed even on the university's website. So another thing I want to really touch on is making your application as well. So I think one of the difference between making applications in Germany for a house and also everywhere else around the world is that you actually have to apply. So you apply like you're applying for a job. You have to tell your landlord all of the things that you do, like, oh, hey, I'm a student, I also work in this place, I earn this amount of money, and I am a clean person, I do not smoke, I do not have pets. There are certain things that would obviously some landlords find attractive, like when you don't have pets. Some landlords actually prefer people who do not smoke, because I think smoke actually leaves can leave some permanent smell in the house, right? So landlords actually prefer people who are just by themselves, so you don't have like a spouse, you don't have children. It's a different ballgame when you have family, right? So you have to inform the landlord about those things. And also, if you're comfortable with it, maybe send them a picture of yourself as well, something where you have an open facial expression. So basically, you're applying like you're writing a cover letter to a job, and this is important for German landlords. At least some of them actually care about some things like that. The thing I want to share is my accommodation story. So like every other international student, I came here with the mindset that since I was moving to Munich, I knew that it was going to be a bit of a hardball. It was going to be difficult to find accommodation, but I was prepared, but at the same time, I was also really scared. So what I did was, I know that there are lots of scammers on the internet, especially when you're not around. So I did not check for accommodation while I was in Nigeria. I waited until I moved to Germany before I started my accommodation search. I know it's really interesting for you to look out for those accommodation online and imagine yourself in those spaces. It's fun and interesting, but honestly, applying from home can sometimes be a bit of a waste of time. So what I did was, of course, I had an idea in mind of what I wanted, but I knew that, okay, it's possible I might want something, but I wouldn't be able to get it. So I had to keep an open mind, right? So instead of trying to search for accommodation, I had my siblings book an Airbnb for me, where I booked it for a week, but thankfully I didn't stay till the end of the week. I only stayed for 3 days. So I arrived in Germany and I stayed in the Airbnb the first night, and then I started searching for accommodation on the Kleinanzeigen app. So it was one of my friends who recommended me to check the gesucht and also the Kleinanzeigen. So I checked and I found some things. So I was actually the Airbnb was like 2 hours away from Munich, but thankfully they have very good accommodation very good transportation network and systems in Germany, so it was quite easy for me to make my way down to Munich to check out those houses. The first place I went to was a WG. Smelled like cats. Like, it had this horrible pet smell. I don't have anything against cats, I just don't like pets as much as maybe having them in my house sometimes. So yeah, I might change. I like dogs, but yeah, that's a story for another day. Anyway, so it had this horrible cat smell. It smelled like cat piss, and it was this man, like he was an Indian guy, and I remember I thought, oh my god, I'm scared. I can't believe I came here by myself, because how will I tell people that I came to find accommodation and this was where I ended up in? Because I was the only one in the house with him where he was like interviewing me, and then he showed me where I would be sleeping, and it looked like a prison ground with like just one small window, and the bed didn't have a bed frame or anything like that. It was just a mattress on the floor. And I thought, oh my god, this is absolutely disgusting, because I had it in mind, like, it's Germany, right? So they are really beautiful accommodation and all of those things. So what I had in mind wasn't what I saw at first, and I was deeply disappointed. And then when we were doing the interview, the guy said that, oh, that he really likes me. Then he said, oh, but that my hair, that he doesn't really like the way I styled my hair, because I had done twists, so I twisted up my hair and it looked like dreadlocks. And the guy was like, oh, he didn't like the way I styled my hair, and that the person who lives here actually gives him a massage every other week, because he works at night, so he's usually very tired. So the lady gives him a massage, and that if he gives me his flat, that I would also have to give him a massage, because that's what flatmates do. Like, I was stunned. I couldn't get out of there faster. I ran away basically, and honestly, that I remember that place because it was at Ostbahnhof, and it took me a while to find my way there, and I was really disappointed. So on my way out, I was calling a lot of hostels to see if there was something for me, because what I didn't have was money. I had a budget of how much I was going to pay, because I didn't have the money to rent a very big flat or anything like that. So my budget was maximum at 500 euros. And also another thing I forgot to add is that in Germany you have to pay a deposit on any apartment you're renting. It's usually 3 months rent as a deposit. Some landlords are kind enough to allow you 2 months rent as a deposit, and some also do 1 month rent as deposit, like my current landlord did. So you have to pay a deposit on any apartment you're renting. I didn't say that in the video, but I just remembered now. And usually, if your landlord is kind, I would advise that if you don't have the money to pay your deposit upfront, but you really like the apartment, you can always ask your landlord if you can pay the deposit in installments, because the deposit is going to be returned back to you. So it doesn't sometimes it doesn't make, especially for a new flat, the landlord would be willing to allow you pay your deposit in installments, and sometimes he won't. He would want you to pay at once, because he has to refund the deposit of the last flatmate. So that's something to look out for and also put in your budget, right? So I left that place and I went to the university at TUM, and while I was there, I was calling a lot of hostels, and they didn't have accommodation available because it's a hostel, so it's usually fully booked. And I didn't have the money to pay another week in my WG, so I was desperate at this point. And I was at the university and checking on Kleinanzeigen when I saw this accommodation pop up, and the ad was placed by a Nigerian, because I recognized the Nigerian name, right? So I checked, and then I called him, and then while we were on the phone, I was trying to like explain that, hi, I'm a student of TUM, that I was not like, oh, are you Nigerian? I said yes. He was like, come now, come. So I went to their house and I saw the room. The man and his wife, very lovely people. Honestly, they were so kind and super helpful. At first I thought, they said that the rent was 550 euros, but then I told them that my budget was 500 euros, and they were super kind enough to reduce the rent for me to 500 euros. And then I paid my deposit in installments. So I paid after 2 months, I completed paying my deposit. But you guys, that was honestly one of the, like, it was really, at that point I knew God was with me. So I don't really have like a horror story to tell when it comes to finding accommodation, but that was my story of how I got my first accommodation in Germany. I had my own bathroom and I was sharing the kitchen with the man and his wife, and I stayed there for a year. And all throughout the time I was there, the woman was really kind, the man was also very kind as well. And at some point I had to leave because I thought, okay, my friend had a free space in her own flat and I wanted to live with my friend, and I thought, okay, yeah, it would be a very nice experience to actually stay in a place that our place is a family house, but the top flat is for the students. So the top flat is vacant, and then the bottom side of the house is where the family stays, right? So I thought, yeah, it would be a good experience to live there, just living in a student flat, so I can come back home and feel a bit freer, right, with the way I choose to live my life and all that. Not like I wasn't free in the other place, but I would be a lot more free. A lot more free. A lot more free. I'll be a lot more free. So I moved from the place where I was, and then guess what? I told my landlord, okay, so this is something you have to know, that if you're living an accommodation, you have to inform your landlord 3 months prior. So especially when you've signed a long-term contract, you have to inform your landlord 3 months before you leave. And if you do not inform your landlord 3 months before you leave, then you pay rent for the 3 months, because the landlord has to also get someone to stay in the house. So like I said, the family I was staying in, they were super kind, and then the man said, okay, that if I can get someone to move into the house while I move out, then it's fine. So I was able to, I posted the accommodation on the students platform, so on Toom's WhatsApp group and other accommodation WhatsApp group. And that's another thing. You can also get accommodation by networking. So talking with other students, you can then get into an accommodation group where people post accommodation in some cities. So anyways, I had to post it on those accommodation groups on WhatsApp, and I got someone who wanted to stay in the place, and so I had to move out. But a month before it was actually not even a month, it was like 2-3 days, the weekend before I was supposed to move out of the flat, the new person I was supposed to go stay with called me. So the landlord called me and told me that she had some bad news, that she had some issues, which is very sad. So she had some issues and that she wouldn't be able to rent the place out to me, and I have to find somewhere else to stay, and I was supposed to leave the house in 2 days. So I had to meet my landlord and explain to him then that, okay, this was what was happening. And then he said, oh, sadly, the other lady already has started moving her things in, that I had to leave. So I called the new landlord I was supposed to stay in, and I explained to her what was happening. And then she said, okay, she was going to talk to her neighbor, and I should come and see the neighbor, and then we can figure out something. So I ended up meeting the woman. We spoke, and she liked me, and she said, okay, that I can come stay in the basement. And they had a really nice basement, so I had the basement to myself. It was like a studio where I had a toilet and a bathroom and everything, but I had to share the kitchen with the rest of the house. So I tried as much as possible to keep everywhere clean and just clean up after, and also help around the house also as much as I can, or as much as I'm allowed to. So they were a German family, and they had people who came in to clean the flat anyway. So it was a very comfortable place. So I stayed there for 3 months, and then when I got accommodation to Ingolstadt, I applied to a couple of places, but I used majorly Kleinanzeigen, and then I got several callbacks. But then the first place I came to Ingolstadt to check, which is the place where I'm currently at, I met the landlord. They were still renovating the flat, so I met the landlord, and he said, okay, yeah, I can come stay. And yeah, I'm here today. So I think that's going to be the end of this video. I feel like I covered up everything, but if you have any question about finding accommodation, please leave it down in the comment section, and I would respond to it as soon as I can. And also, just to add to this, I've gotten so many emails about people asking me to send the CV from my last video. I'm going to send out the CV again. I'll send out the next set of CVs to people who sent me emails this weekend, because you guys, please understand that I also have a job and I'm working full-time now, so it's not easy for me to do all of the things I'm supposed to do, but I'm trying. So I'm currently also working on a website, so I would post resources that I think that are helpful on that website, and also do a bit of blogging as well. So there are certain things I don't want to set up my camera and talk about. I'm going to blog them, so I'll just write them on the website, and then if you're interested you can check it out. Also, I will be posting any resources I find super helpful and all that, so like links to really interesting internships and things that I've just, sometimes I don't apply to them but I find them really helpful. I will just post them there, and if you're interested you can check it out. So once I'm done working on the website, I'm currently building it and it's going to take a while because I'm doing it myself. So once I'm done with the website, I would launch it, and then I would let you all know about it once it's launched. So yeah, that's it about this video. If you enjoyed the video, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up, and also subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. In the meantime, I wish you guys a lovely weekend, and yeah, I guess I'll see you in my next one. Bye.